This is the Hype Squad with Charli McCall, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome to the Hype Squad. I'm Charli McCall, and on today's episode, we have Megan McCall. Megan is a family law attorney who specializes in dissolution of marriage, child custody, child support, and parental relocation. After several years of grinding away and paying her dues in the industry, she shifted gears and turned her focus to health and wellness. Incorporating what she learned in the health and wellness space, in 2023, she published Why a Self-Care Mindset Will Save Your Life and Make You a Better Lawyer, where she discussed work-life balance and preventing burnout. She is now the managing partner of MC Family Law in Plantation, Florida, where she serves clients in South Florida. Megan, welcome to the Hype Squad. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you, Charli. Super excited to talk to you today.
Yeah. So Megan and I talked a little bit before we got on here and started recording, and I had a lot of ideas of things that we could talk about. And then Megan brought to the table Reinvention, which I love and I'm so excited to talk about. So, Megan, I'm going to let you get the conversation started. Let's go all the way back to 2015 and talk about how you started reinventing and what that looked like for you.
Okay, so into 2015, I was completely burned out as a lawyer. I had worked for three different firms, and every single firm I had left thinking I just hated the person I worked for. I was miserable. I mean, it was like crying in the car on the way to work, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is just like life is too short to be this miserable. And if this is the beginning of my career at this point now, I've been practicing law for 5 years. And I just thought I can't sign up for another, 30 or 40 years of this. So at the time, I had just gotten really introduced into Orange Theory, and it was the best part of my day. It was the best 1 hour of my day. I could escape all of the noise of my career. And I was obsessed. I was part of that like orange cult that they have so successfully
Same.
built. Yeah,
Same.
I loved it. I loved it. So I started thinking about getting out of being a lawyer, and I thought, if I could do anything and what makes me happy, right? And fitness really made me happy. And it's not that I wasn't into fitness before. I was a gymnast growing up. I've always really been an athlete. I did competitive cheerleading. I was into going to the gym, for years before Orange Theory. But that was the thing that I loved the most. So I said to myself, how can I make a career out of this? So I made friends with the coaches at Orange Theory, who turned into be really great mentors. And to this day, one of my very best friends is still somebody I met through Orange Theory. So I started making the transition, and it was very slow in the beginning. I needed to get the certifications. So I was studying to be certified as a personal trainer on the weekends and after work. And then I was like, you have to get CPR certified. And so I was doing all these things behind the scenes while I was still practicing law. And then I needed to go in and mentor and kind of like watch coaches. I needed to practice on the mic because you have to do all of this stuff before you audition and before, they send you to a training. And that started to really take away from my time and ability to practice law, right? Because I could only do so much before and after hours. So at some point, I reached kind of a breaking point where I was spending more time out of the office. And remember, this is all pre-COVID. This is before, working remote was a thing. This was way before hybrid. And it really started to interfere with being present in the office because at this point, like I'm a salaried, employee. I can't just be disappearing in the middle of the day. And that's kind of what I was doing. So at some point I pulled the trigger and I quit. And it was against everyone's advice, everyone, including my family. Nobody was particularly supportive of this, because everybody said to me, you are so smart and you've spent all this time and money and energy and education to get here. And now you're going to go work out all day long. And I, it was something inside me that I knew I had to take a break from what I was doing. And it was the thing that fired me up. I was passionate about it. I was excited. It was a get to attitude. Like it was, I get to go coach. I get to go to the studio. Like I was excited to wake up and go do it every day. So I couldn't ignore that fire. I was super fortunate that although my parents weren't particularly crazy about the idea, ultimately they wanted me to be happy. And that was more important than this. My mom was of course horrified, right? Like, now she goes from telling her friends that like her daughter's a lawyer to like her daughter's a fitness coach. Like it wasn't exactly her best brag moment. Um, but everybody got over that, right? So I get into fitness and this was kind of like the first of my reinventing myself, right? Like I had a whole identity wrapped up in being a lawyer and being a professional. And that's where my social network was. And that's where my friends were. And, I had a close knit crew from law school. And now my life was taking a completely different route, right? This is now no longer an 8 to 6 job. This is now like, I'm up coaching at 5 a.m. I'm in the studio coaching at 5 a.m., which means I'm up at 3:30 so that I can be in the studio by 4:30, which means, if you're getting up at 3:30 in the morning, you're going to sleep at like 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So I really had to shift. Everything about my life changed, from my social network to my quality of life, which I think my quality of life went up, right? It went way up. And that was a big sacrifice that I had to make at the time because I had to decide what's more important to me, making money or being happy. Now, it was a bit of a transition too, because keep in mind, I had a lifestyle that was based around being a lawyer, based on a lawyer's income. And that had to change drastically when my income basically got cut in half. But I didn't care at that point. I said, I'd rather be homeless in a box under a bridge than to drive to work and be a lawyer for another day. So that was a huge transition for me. It was transitioning away from a lot of safety and security and there's a lot of guarantees with a salary job and knowing
Yeah.
that you have that comfort to fall back on. But it was absolutely worth it. It was the best thing that I have ever done for myself.
So I have to ask because, and I wrote some notes down while you were talking, which you know me, that's always what I do.
Of
Um,
course.
but so the one thing that came up for me in hearing that part of your story was the permission that you gave yourself in order to make the shift. And I want to go back to that for a second. Like, how long did it take you to finally bite the bullet and go for it, like to actually put in your notice and say, this is what I'm doing? And how long did you like think about it? Okay, I think I want to do this. Can I do this? Does this make sense? Potentially trying to get approval from other people. Like, when did it finally give you, like, you gave yourself permission to move, to make the change?
So I probably spent a couple of months, 2 or 3 months thinking I'm really miserable. Maybe longer thinking I'm really miserable and I don't want to be doing what I'm doing anymore. And it took me another couple months to figure out, okay, what do I really love and what do I want to do? Um, then from the time that I made the decision that I was going to leave law and head into the health and wellness space was probably another 4 to 6 months. And
Okay.
that was me really laying the groundwork. That was me saying, I need to, because I couldn't quit being a lawyer until I had something lined up, right? And so I had to put all of the pieces into place. And that was making sure that I had the certification. That was making sure that, I had that I had something secured. So I didn't exactly, leap without a little bit of a net. So by the time I
Hmm.
pulled the trigger and I quit being a lawyer, I kind of already had things to some degree lined up. I already knew, okay, my audition is on this date. I'm friends with all these coaches. Like I kind of had something already in place. But the reality is things like that don't happen overnight, right? They just like any big transition in life, right? Like assuming that it's a transition you're making by choice, it takes time and you have to make sure that you're doing the groundwork and setting yourself up for success. And I did. I really wanted to make sure that, this wasn't like, oh, I just woke up on a Tuesday morning and it was an impulsive, decision to walk in and quit. I really had spent months laying the groundwork to make sure that it would be as smooth of a transition as it could be. Now, no amount of preparation will make a transition like that smooth, but I did as much as I thought I could to make it as smooth as it would be.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think huge kudos to you because I feel like myself and so many people probably listening to this are in this moment or have been in this moment where it's like, you're not happy, whether it's your job or it's your relationship or anything, right? And it's so hard to take the first step. Like, I feel like a lot of people get stuck in the mental planning, and then when they actually do start making lists and like a physical planning, you get stuck in that. Like, it's scared. Some people, a lot of people, myself included, like to hide behind that list and before they ever like make a jump. So I think that's huge. So how was it when you like fully immersed yourself and committed to health and wellness? What did that feel like leaving law behind?
A huge relief. A huge relief. I went from literally crying in the car on the way to work, being miserable, hating everything about my day, hating just being all around miserable, to waking up and absolutely loving what I did. Now, that did not happen overnight. It was despite my best efforts, it was a rocky transition. There was, some time where things didn't exactly make sense. And I ultimately ended up moving across the state and moving back home to Tallahassee in order for it to really be a smooth transition. And once I got settled and I really got in the groove of things, and I was head coach and I was managing other coaches, I had a little bit more responsibility, but this wasn't an overwhelming amount of responsibility yet. It was just improved quality of life. And it was going to help people who wanted to be there, right? Like people who walk into those studios and walk through those doors are there because they want to be there. They want to make their lives better. They want to feel better, and that was in very stark contrast to what I had been doing before, where the people who walked into my office before when I was practicing law, they didn't want to be there. Nobody wants to be going through a divorce. Nobody wants to be fighting over their kids. Nobody wants to be fighting over child support. And so it went from dealing with people who were miserable and didn't want to be in the position they were in. And I was having to drag them through it. And despite my best efforts of explaining to them, like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel and you will get through this and things will be better at the end, it was like banging my head into the wall. And now in the health and wellness space, I was helping these people do what they wanted to do. I was helping them get stronger. I was helping them, lose weight. I was helping them be the best versions of themselves. And it absolutely lit me up. I loved it for a very long time. And you look back very fondly on that time because it was such an easy time in my life. It was so, it was long days, don't get me wrong, because those morning classes that when you open, man, it makes for long days. And so I don't want to
Yeah.
say it was easy, but it was easy in a very different way, right? It was easy because I was excited about it. It was easy because it was fun. It was physically very hard. Like you get home at the end of the day and you're like, oh, every single muscle in my body hurts and I am exhausted. But it was a very different kind of exhaustion than dealing with people in my capacity as a lawyer. You come home and you're mentally fried, and that is a whole different level of tired.
Yeah. Well, it's like a mental game. I mean, I've experienced that too. Like physical exhaustion versus mental exhaustion are very vastly, vastly different. But also, I think the mindset, like the joy that I'm hearing you talk about that you had with coaching versus a huge lack of joy in the law space that where you were working, I mean, that in and of itself will make or break anything, right? Like if you're actually having fun or enjoying the environment, the people you're around. I've had several jobs in my career that I was miserable in very different fields. Very different, well, not really different. Really, it was like the people I worked with really affected the ambiance of the office, if you will. And I mean, for you, you're not only working with an office full of people, but you're also having clients come in that are miserable and unhappy. And so it was just like I can only imagine everywhere you looked, it was like misery, right? Because if you're
Yes.
miserable, probably all of your coworkers are miserable to some extent. And in my experience, now, granted, I work from home now and I work alone for the most part in the space that I'm in, but I get to choose where my joy comes from more than like having people choose it for me by affecting me in certain ways. So I can only imagine. And I remember Orange Theory, girl. I bled orange for years after I had my daughter, and it's like a family there. You get the same people at the same classes every day, at least in my experience. And it was infectious. I can't imagine being there all day. I'm sure it was exhausting, but like the stamina and everyone's like encouragement and everything is very intoxicating in that space. So I can only imagine what that was like. Um, I know just because I know you that you then jumped into bodybuilding. Do you want to talk about the transition that happened from Orange Theory to that?
Yeah, so it actually happened really kind of simultaneously. So the same time that I got into coaching, I started getting into the bodybuilding space. And ultimately, the bodybuilding space was the demise of my Orange Theory career. But that was another really kind of reinvention of myself, because the space when I was a lawyer was a lot of drinking and socializing, right? Like everybody gets off work and they go to happy hour. And, it was the relationship that I had been in for the 5 years I had been practicing law was very much so focused around going out to eat. And, that was our world. So shortly before my transition into Orange Theory and into bodybuilding, I also ended a 5 year relationship. And that was a relationship that I thought was going to be the person that I was going to marry and spend the rest of my life with. So not only was I, transitioning out of being a lawyer, this was also transitioning into single life. Now I'm transitioning into not only working Orange Theory, but now I'm also into bodybuilding. And now not only have I don't want to say isolated myself from my colleagues, but once you get into bodybuilding, there is no more going out to eat. There is no more drinking. There is no more happy hour. So I really had to reinvent everything about who I was because now not only am I not a lawyer, I'm not friends with, not intentionally, but like, our social lives just didn't align anymore. So not only am I now not really hanging out with those people, but now that I'm in bodybuilding, it's been an option, right? Like going out to eat is not, it was just a complete 180 from
Mhm.
everything that I had spent the last 5 years doing. Going out, drinking, partying, being a lawyer, having a 9 to 5. Now I have crazy, weird hours that are all over the place. I'm eating all of my meals out of Tupperware, and it becomes very isolating. Like the body world is very isolating. The fitness space can be very isolating because you just don't have a lot of flexibility, especially in the beginning. If you want to be successful in that space, you really have to dial it in. And when I say dial it in, it's like, you are measuring everything that you are eating down to the gram, and there is no room for flexibility. That's something that you can earn over time, but it was just everything about my life was now the complete opposite of what it had been just a short time before. And that was difficult in a lot of ways. Not only that, I had moved from South Florida to Tallahassee, which was home to me from years and years prior, but I didn't have a social network there. And so now my life, which had become full of socializing and networking and being very busy, is now busy in a different capacity, but it's like wake up, go to the gym and train, go to Orange Theory, come home and eat, and go to sleep. And
Mm,
I was on a hamster wheel for several years. And once I got, it was initially very isolating and it was a big adjustment. And then once I got settled into it and I started seeing the rewards of the sacrifices that I was making, it became addictive. And then I didn't even mind the isolation. I didn't even mind that I wasn't socializing and I wasn't going out to drink because the rewards that I was seeing were so much better than what I got from those other interactions, right? Like you can only go to happy hour so many times. You can only
hmm
go to dinner. And at some point, all of those interactions are the same. And none of those nights are particularly memorable. And I was seeing, I got out what I put in. And the more I put into bodybuilding and the more I committed and the more I dedicated, the more I was getting out. And that was so addicting in so many ways. And it was also in very stark contrast to what I was getting out of my life as a lawyer. Like that profession can be very thankless.
mm,
Um, there's also no direct correlation between what you put in and what you get out, right? So you can do your very best to represent your client and to prepare for a hearing, to go in front of a judge. You can spend days and hours and weeks getting ready for something, and you can still lose. And you can still fall on your face, and you can still end up in front of a judge who wants to humiliate you. And you know, it was very difficult for me to be really passionate about that because it didn't matter what I did as a lawyer. Oftentimes it felt like it wasn't enough. And bodybuilding was the complete opposite. Fitness in general was the complete opposite. There was a direct correlation between what I put in and what I got out. And I found that to be so rewarding because I think if I work hard, I should be
mm.
rewarded for it. And I got that. And that is probably what kept me sucked in for as long as it did, in the capacity that it was in, and why it's still to this day a huge part of my life.
Mm. I love that. Okay, well, first of all, I was never a bodybuilder, but I have had my own journey with fitness and have counted macros for years at this point. And so the way I can totally understand that part of your journey is for me, and like hearing like your journey, like you had the lawyer part and you were over it, and then you had the Orange Theory and it was infectious and social and energetic, but then you went into what I would consider like a very internal journey. And that was my experience with fitness, food, fitness, macros, all of those things. I had a lot of control. And I also had a lot of isolation, nowhere near the amount of isolation you did. But anytime you're counting macros and you have a goal, your social life changes. Like it's the time that I stopped drinking. It's the time I really cut back on any social engagements. Drinking was a big part of that. But also, like, you can't sit around and snack. Like, you're not going to waste your macros on stupid shit. You're just not going to. And like I said, like nothing like bodybuilding. So like you were tenfold more intense, I'm sure. But for me, it was such a great example. And I kind of heard you say that too, like learning myself, learning what I was capable of, getting like pretty immediate gratification on I do this and this happens, like this cause and effect type of thing. And for me, the control that I could get that I didn't get, and like hearing your story, I'm like, yeah, that totally checks out. I didn't have control in my workplace. I didn't have control in life in general, but I did have control over me and working out. And there's something For me, it took me a really long time to get comfortable in the gym. And I've talked about this in another podcast. I'm not sure if it's aired yet or not. But once I got comfortable, it was like, get out of my damn way. Like, I knew the songs I needed to play. I knew that I don't make eye contact with anybody in that gym. It's like I'm in there by myself. I'm not nice. I don't, not nice. It's not that I'm not nice. I just am not like uber friendly trying to conversate with people. I literally pretend like no one's around me and I don't even look at anybody. But I had to go into this internal thing to learn, okay, I can really bust my ass in the gym and we'll get results. And there is almost nothing as gratifying as that, in my opinion. So I totally see where you got sucked into it. So tell me more, like, how long were you in this part of your journey? What did it look like with the competing? How long did you stay in it? All of that stuff.
So I just want to comment on your note about control. And that is such a huge piece of, I think, what makes the health and wellness space so appealing to people like you and me and all of our other type A people who are listening to this, right? Like, if you like control, then you like this, because this really lends itself to people who like that, because there's a lot of control. You have control over the outcome. If you want to, lose weight or build muscle, or whatever your goal is at the end of this, it is all control based. But you have to really own that, right? Like, you have to know that you have to control all your variables.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be somebody who really likes a schedule and really likes routine and really likes structure. And if you are one of those people, like, this is absolutely the space for you, because you can thrive here, right? Um, you asked me, what would you ask me?
So just
Oh,
like,
my
yeah,
journey.
competing. Yeah.
Okay, so I started competing in 2016. I competed up until 2021.
Oh,
So I competed,
wow.
yeah, I competed for 5 years. The first year, my first show, I did it because of any other stupid reason. It was a guy. He was into competing, and so he got me into competing. And that relationship ended up being a complete dead end, actually in the middle of me getting ready for that show. And I proceeded with the rest of prep, and I went through with that show to prove to myself that I could do this without him, that I didn't need him. And that was also me kind of, it was a super traumatic breakup. It was a super traumatic time in my life. And that was my way of taking back, this theme will keep coming up, control of the
Mm-hmm.
situation. And it was my way to kind of regain my self-confidence and for me to rebuild um my life in a lot of ways. So that's what got me through the first show. And then I came off that show and thought, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. I think one and done, that was fine. Shortly after that, I moved to Tallahassee. And now I'm in a city with people who, my social network was in South Florida, where I had practiced law. And I didn't really know a ton of people in Tallahassee, even though I had gone to high school there. But, this is now, this was 10 years after high school. So nobody I knew was still there. And I was coaching at Orange Theory, and I was there for a couple of months. And I was like, I really need something to channel my energy into. I think maybe compete again. And so I kind of did it because I was bored and I needed something to channel my energy into. I've always been super goal oriented. I graduated high school when I was 17. Graduated college when I was 20. I graduated law school when I was 23. Like, very goal oriented, very focused, I'm always like chasing the next thing, which can be both a blessing and a curse, right? But at this time, I thought, I need something. I need a thing to channel all this energy into. So I found a coach in Tallahassee, who was at my gym, a professional bodybuilder, and I said, let's do this. And I ended up competing with him as my coach for several years. And it was a very different experience than my first show, right? My first show was kind of like, yeah, I'll train, I'll go to the gym. I didn't really follow a strict diet. It was just kind of like I don't even know how to describe it other than like it was really just kind of a bit of a free for all. It was kind of a shit show. My shows that I competed with my coach in Tallahassee were a completely different ball game. This was now like I thought my first prep was structured. That was like a playground. Every show I did with my coach in Tallahassee was incredibly structured. There was preps before preps. It was let's get your food really high so that we in your off season so that we can make sure that when we start dieting that your food is high enough. I mean, it became a year-round thing. It was
Wow.
if I wasn't getting ready to walk on stage, I was spending time in the off season trying to grow, to put myself in the best possible position so that when we did compete, that I, had calories really high, that I had muscle density that I wasn't going to lose. And it became a full-time job. And and still in a lot of ways, my lifestyle is still very similar. And it's a full-time job in order to go to the gym, manage your sleep, manage your water, make sure you're getting enough calories in for the day. Like people don't realize how much they undereat. And if I don't literally set timers on my phone, if I don't get in a routine of eating 5 times a day, then oh my God, I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh, I forgot to eat it, 3 o'clock, and now I'm behind a meal. And so it was absolutely all consuming. And it was
Mm.
all consuming in a really good way because it took up all of my time. My life as a lawyer was very all consuming, but it was sitting at a desk in front of a computer being a slave for 8 or 10 hours a day. And
Mm-hmm.
now, when I was coaching with Orange Theory, it's not all day every day, right? So there were days where I would coach from 8 to noon. Okay, but now it's noon and I'm done with my day. So I needed something else to fill my time with. So there from 2017 until basically 2 years, all of 17 and all of 18, this was my life. My life was Orange Theory coaching, 15, 20, 25, up to 30 hours a week. Would have been a really busy week. And then training and getting ready and competing and prepping on top of that. And that was a grind that I did for 2 years. And but it didn't feel like a grind because I loved it. Like I was excited to get up and go to the gym and train and get my meals in and go to Orange Theory. Like I loved it until I didn't. And towards the end of 2018, I actually moved from Tallahassee to Jacksonville. And I was still with Orange Theory, but I was with a different group. And the downside to being an overachiever is that you often get rewarded with more work. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened, right? So I got promoted, promoted, promoted. Now I'm head coach of a studio in Jacksonville. And the reason why I got into fitness in the first place was for quality of life. I wanted a better schedule. I wanted more flexibility. I wanted I wanted a better quality of life. But after 2 years of excelling and doing really well, more responsibility came with more responsibility. And now I'm working not only coaching, but also doing administrative stuff, managing other coaches, helping rebuild a studio that had a lot of problems. I'm now working 40 or 50 hours a week. And I'm looking
Wow.
around going, what the hell am I doing? And I'm making a fraction of what I was making as a lawyer. And I wasn't happy anymore. And that was kind of the same thing that got me out of being a lawyer in the first place was I wasn't happy. And when I wasn't happy anymore, it was time to make a move. And it wasn't just that I wasn't happy, it was that I actually had to be miserable, right? Because to your point earlier, right? There's a lot of people out there who are just, not happy with where they are in life, but people don't make changes because they're not happy. People don't make changes until they're miserable. And that's exactly what it took for me. It took me being miserable as a lawyer, crying in the car on the way to work for me to make the leap into health and wellness. And it took me being miserable in health and wellness to go back to being a lawyer. And I knew I was miserable in the health and wellness space and being at Orange Theory when going to the studio to coach became an I have to kind of thing. So it went
Mm.
from, when I started, it was I get to, and I was so excited. It was like it lit me up in the morning. I get to go to the studio. I get to coach. I get to go help these people. And now it was a I have to. Ugh, I have to go to the studio.
Mm.
And that was my like ick moment. And once I realized that that's where my headspace was, and I was not enjoying what I was doing anymore, I was like, something has to change. And it took me, I also didn't really love Jacksonville. That had something to do with it too. So it was a combination of I wasn't happy where I lived, I wasn't really happy with work. I missed my friends in South Florida. I missed my social network. I also saw my legal community, my colleagues really progressing in their lives. And, this wasn't about keeping up with the Joneses or being on anybody else's timeline, but I saw their lives moving forward, and I didn't feel like my life was moving forward. I felt like, yeah, I was happy and I was having a good time, but I was kind of stagnant. And I felt like I was kind of tapped out. Like, unless I was going to buy into a franchise, and I wasn't really interested in that at that point, then I needed to make a change. I also alluded to this earlier, but bodybuilding really ruined Orange Theory for me. And what I mean by that is bodybuilding is a very different kind of structure than Orange
Mm-hmm.
Theory. And I am fully bought into, and to this day, still identify as a bodybuilder. And I don't think that Orange Theory is conducive to that. I think that there's a lot of um, room for improvement in their workout. I don't think that their marketing is entirely honest. And I no longer bought in. Like, I drank the orange Kool-Aid for a long time, but once you know better, you do better. And I couldn't unknow what I knew from bodybuilding. And so it made it really hard for me to go into Orange Theory and to coach these people and to sell this, best
Yeah.
1 hour workout in the country, because I just didn't believe in it anymore. And so it was really a culmination of a couple of things. It was I didn't believe in the workout anymore. I wasn't happy in Jacksonville. I wasn't happy working. I lost the quality of life that I came into Orange Theory for. And the combination of all of those things just made it not right for me anymore.
Mm.
And when you know, and I just don't know any other way to say it, right? But you get to this point and you're just like, something in your gut just says, this isn't for me anymore. And so that's what happened. That's how I left Orange Theory and came back into the legal space and came back to South Florida and reinvented myself again.
Mm. Oh, so I want to go back. I made a couple of notes too of things I wanted to go back on. First of all, Orange Theory, I will always give credit to Orange Theory for sparking my health journey. I I can't say I never worked out because I played organized sports in high school and stuff like that, but outside of that, I never worked out. And I went to Orange Theory for the first time. My daughter was like, I don't know, 6 weeks old, I think, six to 12 weeks old, like right at the very beginning. And I said, oh my God, I have to go back to the gym. I have to lose all this baby weight. And I did Orange Theory for probably 2 years. And I like when you were talking about how different weight training, like bodybuilding, so to speak, is different. I had a very distinct shift. And a lot of it came from like injuries that I got in Orange Theory from just way overdoing what too rushed, like not knowing like the body mechanics I needed to have in order to like run and stuff like that. But there was a very distinct shift when I said, basically, fuck cardio. I am only walking. I'm going to lift and I'm going to walk. And I think a lot of that came from macro counting. Like once you realize the calories in and the calories out, like you're not wasting calories out on cardio. You need them for muscle building, and you really have to learn that. And that's a big process. And so very much to what you said, I was like, okay, Orange Theory is no longer for me. And I think fitness in general is very seasonal for people, at least in my experience. Like you don't do better until you know better, and you have to figure out your body. And or there was a reason why I kept having all these injuries. If it wasn't Orange Theory, it would have been something else. But when I moved into just weightlifting and walking, I never hurt myself anymore. Like I wasn't killing myself for headaches and dehydrated and all of that. So I really resonated with that. And I remember going back to what you said about, sorry, go ahead.
I want to give credit because you're totally right. Like I am so grateful for Orange Theory. So as much as I left Orange Theory and came back to being a lawyer with a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, I am so incredibly grateful for what Orange Theory gave me. And it is still absolutely 1,000 times better than sitting on the couch doing nothing, right?
Oh, yeah,
It
for sure.
Were it not for Orange Theory, I would not have gotten into this health and wellness space. I would not have had an escape from being a lawyer. And so I want to highlight and I want to give recognition where it's due. I just think it's something that most people should outgrow, right? Which is kind
Yeah.
of what you're saying your experience was.
Exactly, exactly. Like, and I think that even the people I worked out with too, like, again, going back to seasonal, like Orange Theory serves its purpose till this day for the people who use it. But you do get to a point where, like, for me, I didn't know how not to overdo it with either, the circuits or the running, and I didn't know my body well enough. And so I needed that so I knew what I didn't want to do, which kind of sounds like I'm bashing it. I'm not whatsoever. But when you were talking about seeing your friends who were still lawyers and their careers progressing, wow, that so landed for me because I am a labor and delivery nurse. I still keep my license up to date, although I have not worked in nursing in 7 years at this point. And
Wow.
I still to this day will see the girls that I went to school with and the girls that I worked with, and I'll see them like growing. And a lot of them went back and are now nurse practitioners or CRNAs and things like that. And a part of me is always sad's not the right word. Jealous, envious is probably a little bit better. That I'm like, oh my God, where could I have been had I stayed? Now, granted, with all that being said, nursing still to this day would not work for my life, like the schedule and all of that stuff. So I'm definitely where I'm meant to be, and I don't regret what I'm doing now for a split second. This is what I was meant to do. But the nursing, watching people in any way of life, whether it's like you've moved away and the people are still there and they're having their best life, or it's a career specific thing, it is hard to watch people grow and think to yourself, where would I be if I would have stayed? I think that that's something that will resonate with a lot of people, whether it's career or otherwise. It's hard, even like with past relationships, right? Like if you look at an ex and you're like, oh my God, I never thought he had it in him. And now he's like, even that's the same kind of comparison, in my opinion. Like all of that shit is really hard to like watch other people's journeys that could have been yours, right? And then also, I really want to highlight what you said, like, I get to do this versus I have to do this. I really, again, want to highlight because I think that that's a great mantra for people to come back to. If you're saying to yourself, I get to do this, that means you're honored, you're fulfilled, you're grateful. Like there's so many things versus I have to. It's like, pulling teeth, and it just by just the quote in and of itself kind of sounds like you're miserable a little bit when you say things like that. So I love that reminder. That was great. So tell me, going back into law after being out of it for so many years, like why did you think going back now would be better? How was the transition? Walk us through that.
So I want to go back to your comment about get to versus have to, right? Because I have a distinct memory once I moved from Jacksonville back to Fort Lauderdale. I remember sitting at this red light and I was on my way home from the gym one morning and I was watching the sun come up and I had this overwhelming moment of gratitude. And it to this day like still makes me emotional. And I remember thinking, holy shit, I am so damn grateful for where I'm at. I was back in Fort Lauderdale. I was back with my friends. I was back with people I went to law school with. I had taken South Florida for granted, I think, because I'd lived here for so long. And I didn't realize how amazing it was and how much I loved it until it was gone. And that's so cliche, like you don't realize what you have until it's gone. But I was now back. And so I wasn't gonna let I wasn't gonna take it for granted again, right? And I just remember sitting at that red light on the way home from the gym, and this is the beginning of 2019, and just being like, I am so damn grateful I live here. I am so grateful for my life. I am so grateful that I'm in the space that I'm in. And it was, I think that segues nicely into your question, which was, well, how was the transition back? And the transition back was full of so much gratitude. I was so happy to come back to South Florida and to come back into being a lawyer. And part of that was because I came back in a very different capacity. When I came back into being a lawyer, I came back with a very different mindset. I came back also with what I feel like was a lot of leverage because I didn't come back needing the job. I knew that I still had the ability to stay in the Orange Theory health and wellness space if I wanted to. And to some degree, I kind of did. There was a little bit of an overlap when I came back into being a lawyer. I continued to coach at Orange Theory at a studio here in Hollywood, part-time. So the transition back was not a cold, hard stop. It was not, I quit Orange Theory altogether and started lawyering full time. It was, I continued to keep Orange Theory as part of my life, but it wasn't the primary part of my life anymore. It was 2 days a week, only in the mornings. I had no additional responsibilities out of coaching. I walked in, I coached, I walked out the door. I wasn't responsible for managing other coaches or anything else in the studio. I came back to enjoying it to some degree. I still didn't necessarily believe in it anymore, but it was a much smaller part of my life. And I managed to come back into lawyering also kind of part-time. And when I came back into lawyering, I came back in and negotiated to come back as a contract employee. I came back and I said, I'm not coming back as a salaried employee. If you want somebody who's going to sit here from, 8 to 6, I'm not your girl. No hard feelings. If that's what you're looking for, find somebody else, because I'm not going to set myself up for failure again. I already did that once. I know how this road goes, and I'm not doing it. And I was very fortunate to find somebody who that fit with. And they said, absolutely. If you get paid for what you work, you don't work, you get paid. There's no benefits. That's part of being a contract employee, right? So no paid time off, no vacation, no 401k, no, all of the perks that come with being a salaried employee. I forwent, but that was okay. I was okay with that because it came with the flexibility and the freedom to have a life. And that, I think, was a lot of what burned me out before. When I left law prior, it was because it felt like it wasn't my life. I was on somebody else's schedule. I was on somebody else's agenda. I felt like I was a slave. So I said, I'm just not doing that again. And so when I came back into law, I had a very different schedule than I had the first time I practiced. I kept health and wellness and fitness and bodybuilding first and foremost in my life. I knew that that was the thing that kept me anchored. That's the thing that kept me grounded. That's the thing that kept me sane. And I was not about to give that up. So I negotiated a deal where I continued to train. I continued to compete for another 2 years. So I came back into being a lawyer in the beginning of 2019. I competed in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And that was only possible because I came back into being a lawyer in a very different capacity. I could not have competed and I could not have kept health and wellness first and foremost in my life if I had come back as a salaried employee. So I had a very untraditional, I guess, path to get here. And it was something that I can't imagine that there's probably very many other people in town who had gigs like this, right? Like most attorneys want somebody who will be there 8, 10 hours a day or whatever. They're going to bill X number of hours per month. I had no billable hour requirement. It was, as long as you're taking care of your responsibilities, you're returning client calls, you're getting things done, like you make your own hours, you work as much or as little as you want. And that worked for me for the better part of 5 years.
Wow.
And so for 5 years, that was the deal that I had. It was, it just worked. It worked for me. And I honestly said so many times, I'm never going to give this up. I
Mm.
thought, this is the best gig ever. It was super flexible. It was a husband and wife team that owned the firm, and I got to bring my dog to work. I wore Lululemon. Like I could come straight from the gym as long as clients weren't coming in. Expectations were pretty low, and it worked until it didn't. And this is just like, at the end of me practicing law the first time, like you just know one day this isn't working for me anymore. Just like me leaving Orange Theory and coming back to being a lawyer, you hit this wall and you're like, this just isn't working for me anymore. And that was exactly what happened. And after 5 years, literally 5 years to the month I had been with this firm, I said, this isn't working for me anymore. And expectations had changed, and my life was completely different. I had just ended another very serious relationship. And it was I just felt like I was stepping into another opportunity to reinvent, redirect, take a hard left turn. Like, when you know, and it's intuition in the strongest way. You just wake up and you're like, can't do this anymore.
Mm.
And when I hit that wall again, that I can't do this anymore, it was another moment for me to say, what's next? Right. And that soil was so rich for growth. And I thought, I need to use this time, both personally and professionally, to work on myself and to kind of figure out what my next chapter is going to be. And this time it was more me taking control of my life. And I really see that as the theme and kind of the common thread in all of this. It was when I left being a lawyer the first time, it was because I wanted more control over my life. And I got that in fitness. And then when I came back to being a lawyer and I came back as a contract employee, it was with this underlying or undercurrent of control. I wanted to maintain control of my life. And this most current change, where I've opened my own firm with my best friend, is more of I want control over my own life. And that was kind of what pushed me out of my old firm. It was, expectations had changed and I was losing control of the very thing that I came there to have, right? I came into
Mm.
this job 5 years ago because I wanted control over my schedule and I wanted to come and go as I please. And that bit by bit had been taken away from me. And I said, I, I can't do this. This is the deal has changed and this is not what I signed up for. And I wanted to take control of my life again. And that's what opening my own law firm has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to take control over my life so that I can decide what my schedule looks like. I can decide how busy I want to be. I can decide, you know, how much money I want to make, right? Like my life is entirely now controlled by me. And there's so much power in that. And this, again, common thread of control, right? It was control in bodybuilding, it was control in the health and wellness space, it's control in my own career. And again, for better or worse, it's a thing for me, right? But I've learned to use that as a strength, right? Use it to my advantage, use it to make myself better rather than letting it take control of me.
Mm. I love that, Megan. So a couple of things I want to go back and hit on. First of all, you spoke about intuition, and I think a lot of people talk about, and I even say it all the time, like on repeat, like trust your intuition, trust your intuition. And what I fail sometimes to mention, and one thing I want to highlight right now is yes, You should be able to trust your intuition. But in order to hear, feel, and trust your intuition, you have to know yourself. And I think a lot of people miss that step and they're just like, I don't know what I'm telling myself. Like, what's my body saying? What is my mind saying? I don't know. I don't know the language. Right. And I think, hearing about this journey, it's like with every reinvention, you learned yourself, you showed up for yourself, you committed to yourself. And so then it's like you understand the language of intuition that your body is speaking to you on a whole nother level. But I also think that when you trust your intuition for like the first big moment in your adult life, every consecutive time after that, that voice gets louder and it gets easier to dive head first.
100%. 100% agree with you.
Yeah, it's like you have proven to yourself that you're going to listen. First of all, you're going to trust the gut instinct and you're going to do something with it. You're not just sitting there thinking something feels off, my body is trying to tell me something and you're just sitting in that misery. You're actually making change. And it's one thing I say like, just doing hard things in your life, once you get through that first hard thing, every hard thing after that gets a little bit easier because you start to learn to trust yourself and you start to give yourself more power to know, I'm going to make this shit happen regardless of the outcome. Like I am in control. And even like when you coming back, you sharing the part about coming back to law and what sounded like setting some hardcore boundaries that kept your power, right? That gave you that leverage that you needed to go into it. Because also, you're coming back into it with a completely different mindset. And you spoke about this where you need me, I don't need you. And so, if you want me, you've got to do this in order to get me because I'm worth so much more than I ever was before. And that is like a confidence, power, mind state, like all of that stuff, which sounds like to me really came from you trusting yourself and jumping off the cliff to begin with, right? And so you come back with all this power, you set these boundaries, people are listening. It's like when a really confident woman walks into the room and everyone's like, "Damn, who is that?" She's probably not that confident, but she's coming into the room with this aura and everyone is treating her accordingly, right? And it sounds like it's kind of the same thing. Like you came in that law office, like, if you want me, this is what you're going to do to get me. And they did it, right?
Confidence that I built in the 2 years that I came out of being a lawyer was life changing.
Mm,
And law school is professors beating you down and making you feel like you don't know anything. And then the first couple years as an associate, as a young lawyer, it's a lot of the same. It's a lot of this like beat down, beat down, beat down. And after years and years and years of that, it's easy to
mm.
believe it, right? Because that's the messaging that you keep getting. Well, when I got into the health and wellness space, I regained that. I took my power back. And, there's this saying, right? The weights never get lighter, but you get stronger. And that is absolutely what happened to me when I was in the health and wellness space. I learned that I can do hard things, that I can pick up heavy weights. And then I learned not only can I pick up heavy weights, half the time I can come in the gym and pick up heavier weights than the guy who's on the bench next to me. And that built such an amazing foundation of confidence that when I came back to the legal community and I walked in and I negotiated the job that I had, I 100% attribute that to the confidence that I built while being involved in fitness. It was absolutely life changing. And there are so many, we could do an entirely different podcast on all of the benefits that come from health and wellness and from fitness. And it was just, it completely changed my life for the better. And I don't have, there's so many good things that
I
I
know.
want to say about it, right? And but were it not for that time away, I would not have come back into the legal community with that level of confidence or the ability to negotiate what I wanted. Like, I just, it was the absolute best thing I could have ever done for myself. And although it wasn't a forever thing, it was a chapter, right? It was only really 2.5 years out of my life. It was the most life-changing 2.5 years of my entire life.
Mm,
One more thing. You talked about making big decisions as an adult, and how your intuition just gets louder every time, right? So when I left being a lawyer and I went into the fitness space, I was 28 and I'm 36 now. And when I did it then, it was still a lot of second guessing myself. Like it was
mm,
still a lot of like, am I making the right choice? Am I going to regret this? What if I can't support myself? And a lot of like second guessing. And every decision I've made since then has been, of course I can do this. Like, yeah, this is going to be a scary leap, but like I have done hard things before. You know, you jump off the cliff and you grow wings on the way down and you just figure it out. But it takes doing that a couple of times for you to know that you'll figure it out. And so I just want to echo exactly what you said. Like, you, once you listen to your intuition as an adult, it gets easier every single time, right? So I've made a couple of big transitions since then, you know, coming back into being a lawyer and then leaving the security of a job and starting my own law firm. Like each of those were very scary transitions, but they get easier. They get easier because you build on it and you learn, like, I've done hard things before. I landed on my feet last time. I'll figure it out. You know, I have a great support system of people around me who believe in me too, but ultimately it's a belief in myself that has allowed me to get here.
mm. I love that. I also think, like, as far as opportunities are concerned, if an opportunity comes to you or you seek it out and it's scary, that means you need to do it. Like, in my opinion, of course, there will be like you know, things that don't quite fit that idea. But for the most part, if it's an opportunity and it's scary, that means you have to do it. Like it's a growth stepstone, whatever you wanted to call it. It's something that you need to do. So I love that. Megan, I have loved hearing this whole story. I know you and I know some of this story, but it was so cool to hear the entirety of it. So thank you so much. This is obviously the Hype Squad. So I do want to ask you for you to share a little bit of your hype list with me. So I want to hear one achievement that you've had and an obstacle that you overcame in order to achieve that.
So I'm gonna go with what's most recent, right? What's fresh on my brain, and that is making the leap to open my own law firm. That was a big, scary thing for me. And I had to overcome a lot to get here, and I'll try and keep this brief. But it was a couple of things, right? It was first you have to get over the financial security that even though I was a contract employee, I knew that I had a paycheck that was going to come in. And even if it wasn't the same amount every single week or every single month, like there was security in knowing that I had a job and that clients were going to kind of come in. And so I had to get over the safety that came with that for the uncertainty that comes with running your own business. So that was huge. I also was coming off of a really tough breakup. And so it was a lot of change at once. It was a lot of change in my personal life and a lot of change in my professional life, all happening at once. Um, but I think that the soil for growth is so rich after situations like that that you have to take advantage of it, and so that's what I did. So I'm super proud of myself for making this leap, especially given all of the change that has gone on in my life over the course of the last year, both personally and professionally. So yeah, that's it's a big leap, it's a big change, it's scary just like you said, but you know what, scary things are where the best opportunities are.
1,000%. Yes. Megan, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me today. I have loved every second of this and I cannot wait for you to come back. I will put everything in the show notes for how you can get in contact with Megan. If you ever want to use her for law services or anything like that, follow her Instagram, all the things. I will put that in the show notes. And again, thank you so much. And thanks for getting hyped with me.
Thank you, Charli. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.